Welcome to our show, Holding Ground. My name is Laura Richer. I'm a psychotherapist and the owner of Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. Each week, I'm joined by another therapist from the Anchor Light team to tackle important topics in mental health and psychotherapy. Our goal is to promote well-being by normalizing mental health challenges. We are here holding ground for you every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. on KKNW.
Good morning. You are listening to Holding Ground, the show that brings a little bit of everything in the realm of positive mental health and psychotherapy every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. here on KKNW and anywhere you stream podcasts. My name is Michelle. I'm a licensed psychotherapist and the clinical director at Anchor Light Therapy Collective in Seattle, Washington. And today I'm joined by my co-host, Brenda Gill, who is also a licensed psychotherapist at Anchor Light. Good morning, Brenda. I always love hosting with you.
Thank you. Good morning, Michelle. I'm really excited to be here today. I think we've got a great topic for our listeners today. Today, we're going to be talking about stonewalling and how this style of communication can derail the opportunity to have good and effective communication with your significant other and maybe in other relationships in your life as well.
Perfect. Yes, this definitely comes up a lot in the work with couples that I see. This is a very natural response to conflict when that comes up. So real quick reminder to our listeners, you can find us all over social media, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And we are very excited to announce that we have our new location open down in Uptown. So you can find our location information on our website, anchorlighttherapy.com. And we also have new therapists. We are expanding our team. So we have lots of folks available to take a complimentary consultation and meet you and maybe see if it's a good fit, and you can join us here at this location. So, Brenda, jumping in, can you start by defining stonewalling? What is this?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, it's a style of communication. However, it's not a very healthy and productive method of communicating. And so some people might experience stonewalling when the amount that they can tolerate during a discussion or argument is become overwhelming. And so stonewalling can almost be a protective mechanism to manage some of the discomfort that's happening in that interaction. It can help a person maybe disconnect. And so there's some emotion regulation that's maybe becoming challenging in that interaction. And so this person is just physically there, but maybe not mentally engaged in that conversation anymore. Some people describe it as the fear of, oh my gosh, if I say something, it's just going to make it worse. And so they're there in the room, but they're not really able to engage in a productive conversation anymore.
Yeah. They go into emotional brain, right? When they get overwhelmed by conflict. And then some people, right, get really amped up, and other people withdraw, right, and shut down. And, that can really derail communication. So, and we'll talk about that more. But yeah, this again shows up a lot in couples, right? It can be, like you said, physically present, but emotionally not present, right? But also sometimes we'll see this by, oh, my spouse got really upset and he just left the room and I didn't know when he was coming back. And so it can also be a physical removal, but yes, the emotional piece, absolutely too.
Yeah. But both, whether it's I'm staying there and no longer engaging or I'm needing to walk away, there's some type of emotional feeling of being overwhelmed that's happening. And so this can happen in any type of relationship. It's not necessarily something that we see in just, toxic or very unhealthy couples. Often it's because there's some communication skill that's missing, or maybe there's some insecurity, or there's some barrier to being able to really respond to the partner. Sometimes we also see this happening in what we call a complementary relationship, where one partner can be a pursuer, maybe they tend to be very critical, and then the stonewallers might be the person that distances themselves, right? Again, maybe they're feeling overwhelmed by actual or maybe just perceived criticism from the other person. And so again, this can happen in any relationship, whether it's chronic or maybe every once in a while, based on the topic or maybe the level of stress, right? Again, it has to do with how much a person might be able to tolerate.
Yeah. Yeah, where I see the stonewalling in particular as a response to criticism, a lot of times, I've had clients before where they feel criticized, right? And it reminds them of growing up when they always got in trouble. And so maybe their current partner is not actually criticizing, but it feels like that because feedback can even feel like that. So that's a really big one in terms of when stonewalling will present. I'm being criticized. I'm just going to shut down because I can't take this. I don't have the emotional regulation to handle feedback or criticism.
Exactly, right. And so again, there's maybe some skills that are missing there, whether it's to communicate or maybe some emotion regulation, right? And on either side, right? We'll say maybe from the partners that's stonewalling or the other person. And so sometimes, yeah, as you mentioned that it could look like partner walking away. Sometimes there's also just lack of eye contact. So really kind of showing that I've disconnected, which unfortunately can make the pursuing partner more intense, right? Because they're like, why aren't you responding to me, right? And there's frustration that could come with that, and maybe that even increases the criticism, which unfortunately won't really change the stonewalling. If anything, it worsens it, right? Or it really leads to the person needing to walk away at that point. And then unfortunately the other person could feel like, wow, I'm cared for and all of that. And we'll talk a little bit more about the impact on the partner in a moment, actually.
Right. So, and you touched on the physical cues, right? That somebody is starting to stonewall. We talked about the emotional ones. And real quick, can you talk about the difference between intentional stonewalling and unintentional?
Yeah, I'd like to say that stonewalling is most often unintentional. Again, it comes as a response of feeling overwhelmed. Maybe it's that lack in communication skills, or maybe it comes from a person that's so used to just problem solving. And when they're hearing all this maybe emotional language or communication from their other partner, they just don't know what to do with it, right? And so again, maybe that can lead to them feeling overwhelmed. So, most commonly when we see this in a couple, it is unintentional. It almost takes them coming into couple therapy to realize, oh, that's what's happening in the relationship. However, sometimes it could be intentional. So maybe there's this particular topic, again, maybe something that tends to hit on an insecurity, and people can engage in stonewalling to try to avoid this type of conversation. And so it could be that they've learned that, oh, this is an effective mechanism for me avoiding this conflict. And so they just continually walk away, or maybe try to shut down the other partner that's bringing up the concern. In some rare cases, it could turn into a form of trying to control their partner and what's safe to talk about or not talk about in the relationship.
Right. And, with especially this unintentional piece, right, understanding how this might be working in the brain is interesting. And what happens, like, if I feel like you're criticizing me or conflict is just becoming too much, right, and that emotional flooding, our brains kind of go into that fight, or freeze mode, right? This is an anxiety provoking situation. It feels dangerous in some sort of way, right? Most of the times emotionally dangerous. And, my partner, right, is going to say something that I just can't handle, right? So at first, the stonewalling very much can look like our brain is going into freeze mode, right? You just, kind of like play dead there for a minute, right? Because you're just so overwhelmed. And then most people will then go into flight, right? I'm just going to leave the room. I have to get out of here, which is actually, and we'll talk about, ways of working with this in a second, right? But fleeing sometimes is the appropriate response. There's just ways of doing it better. And then this can put our partner into that fight brain, right? Why aren't you talking to me? Now I'm going to yell and become louder because you're obviously not listening. And so, like you were saying earlier, Brenda, it perpetuates the cycle, right? So if you're stonewalling me, suddenly I feel invisible, ignored, unimportant, right? So again, I'll yell because I feel unheard. I'll pursue pursue you. So maybe I'll chase you into the other room. Maybe I'll start knocking on the door. Sometimes we'll see this a lot with texting, right? Are you coming out of there? When are we going to talk, right? What time are you going to be home? We need to fix this. And, this is how I feel. And that pursuing digitally too is just, it will keep your partner in the stonewalling, probably won't answer you for a while. So keeps both of you active in the cycle of conflict because you're pushing each other's buttons.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this can become something chronic, right? Because if this cycle starts to, continues to be fed, right, if there's no resolution, the concern is never addressed, then maybe the partner that felt ignored right now has maybe more resentment. And so when the concern comes up again, now it's even more intense. And so it could be that now the stonewalling is happening more frequently. And again, it could be because folks, as you mentioned, sometimes in childhood, right, we see conflict, we deal with difficult situations, and so that can make us conflict avoidant, and maybe not equip us with the skills to solve and navigate that conflict. And so stonewalling once again, shows up as a coping mechanism in those cases, but unfortunately can just make the conflict worse and stretch it out for longer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point. What is taught to us when we're young, right? We tend to adopt those things. So if we see conflict in the home in general, that can just be too much for a kid, right? They'll shut down because that feels like the best thing. I'm just going to kind of make myself invisible right now. I'm going to get out of here because this is too intense. I don't want to get in trouble, right? If our parents or caregivers are modeling poor conflict, right? What if they're yelling and the other one always storms off into the other room? We learn, okay, this is how I handle conflict. If I don't like it, I get out of here, right? I ignore my partner. I make them feel invisible. And that's the best strategy, which of course we know is not.
Yeah. So sometimes when I work with folks where stonewalling is showing up, those are some of my assessment questions for them to figure out, how is conflict dealt with in the home as they were growing up, to understand like what skills are there available to them, what models are there. Also just, what has been the outcome of conflict so that I can better understand maybe how they're perceiving the conflict. And again, it can even happen in relationships where couples have great friendship and really want to be working as a team, but if some communication skills are lacking to just really listen to the concerns without becoming overwhelmed or without taking a break, right, when things are getting too heated or too overwhelming, then unfortunately stonewalling can make some of those conflicts worse and eventually push partners away, even if they've got pretty good foundation.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Assessing in the beginning of working with a couple, you and I definitely do that to identify areas of improvement. And, I think I hear on every consultation, Brenda, and every first session with folks, and you probably do too, our number one goal is to improve communication. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the things that keeps people really stuck. And, showing that and working with couples and improving this. And it's just some minor tweaks that you have to do when this comes up for yourself, and teaching skills like that. And it really can improve things. So yeah, this is definitely one that I see all the time.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, and even the Gottman Institute speaks about this. They've identified that stonewalling is the fourth horseman. And so there's this idea of four horsemen that represent negative communication styles in a relationship, and stonewalling is the fourth one. For each of these horsemen, the Gottmans have identified antidotes, so things that you can do to combat these negative communication styles. And so for stonewalling in particular, they suggest that folks take a break, to self-soothe. And they recommend that this be for at least 20 minutes based on the research on how long it takes to physiologically come back to a place of calm where you can re-engage in a conversation and be more constructive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so it has that element of I need to leave right now. I need to remove myself from the situation, which is spot on, because if you're getting to the point of stonewalling, right, you're overwhelmed. There's nothing really left for you to, really be able to have a productive conversation, a compassionate conversation at that point, because you're totally an emotional fight brain, right? So emotional reasoning and caring about others, that sort of thing, our brain shuts down. It's just, okay, how do I survive in this situation, right? So taking that break, Brenda, let's talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah.
So first of all, most folks can tell, right? And we practice teaching couples, get it more in tune, right? What's happening for you during conflict? Pay attention to what your responses are, what the triggers might be, because that's a way we can work with that. But another way of doing it, sometimes people aren't able to catch it in their brains sometimes. So we can physically test to see if we're getting emotionally flooded, emotionally overwhelmed. So just by taking your pulse. So most people, their resting heart rate is about 80. If you are an athlete, your resting heart rate is a little bit more than that. So knowing what your resting heart rate is really important. And then taking your pulse. So anything when you get to like the 100 range, that's your body saying, all right, this is too much, right? So that's a helpful thing for folks sometimes if they're not emotionally aware to catch themselves. So, in the past we would teach like, touch, an artery, right? Like on your neck, like just feel that. But so many people also now have these digital watches that take their pulse as well. I'm not that cool yet to have one of those, but I hear they're great. So that's a way of being able to tell, okay, it might be time to take a break. So Brenda, what do you want to say more about the taking a break piece?
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So kind of taking responsibility for yourself is what I was hearing from you, Michelle, right? Like noticing, okay, what are my triggers? What are my physiological and emotional signs that I'm getting overwhelmed? And so once an individual recognizes that, they can call a timeout. It's really important that the partner respect this timeout because it's going to be beneficial for both of you. It's going to get you closer to the goal of being able to have a constructive conversation. And so you can even decide on a signal. We recommend that couples figure this out before a conflict even starts so that you can mutually agree on what the sign to stop is. And then, as we mentioned, at least taking a 20-minute break. In that time, you want to do something that's distracting, something that takes your mind off the conflict so that you can effectively soothe. And then, maybe Michelle, you can do you have any examples of what some of your clients do within that self-soothing time to take their minds off that conflict?
Yeah, so this is a time for distraction. This is a time we promote scrolling on social media, watching TV, also exercise, whatever it is that really helps you distract yourself from, stressors that are going on. So because if we go and take our break and we're sitting there, oh gosh, I'm so mad. I can't believe she said that, just really staying in that, the rumination and the focusing on the conflict will keep us there, will keep us emotionally escalated. We won't be able to self-soothe. So we need to be doing something else, whatever that might be. And like you said, right, this can make the partner feel, even more upset, but what we want to do to help that upset, so our partner is not chasing us down, right? Not questioning when we're going to come back to the conversation. Let your partner know. So this is all you have to do really to really change this for your partner. Let your partner know, hey, this is really important to me. This is, a conversation I want to have. I can see it's meaningful to you or it's meaningful to the relationship, right? So I need to go take a break and put a time limit on it. So let your partner know, I need 20 minutes, I need 3 hours, right? We don't necessarily ever want to go into the next day, but let your partner know how much time you're going to need and say, and then you're going to come back to the conversation after that when you're both more calm, that rational brain kicks back in. We can, say and do things that we're not going to regret later. And then your partner knows, okay, we're returning to this. This reduces their anxiety about that. I'm curious for you, Brenda, as we're talking about this relationship between stonewalling and then the more anxious partner, right, the pursuer. But what have you seen in couples where both are stonewallers? Have you seen that?
This might just lead to avoiding, right? So there's gridlock, right? And so I think everything that you described, Michelle, about taking a break still counts for those couples, right? The ones where both of them, right, maybe distance themselves. And so after they've taken that break, we do teach a few other tools. I think myself in particular, I'll go back into some Gottman communication tools to show them how they can start to re-engage and how they can slow down their conversation to avoid escalation and make it a little bit more safe and more clear. Some of the options that these actually, not even just the stonewaller couples, but any couple that's experiencing this stonewalling, some options that are available to them is to try the conversation again. They can table it, or they can choose to just drop the subject if they notice, because sometimes it happens where it's like, why are we even arguing about this? Right? Why did that even come up? Right? It might just be some simple miscommunication that occurred. And so those are typically the options that I'll provide for clients. And again, giving them the communication tools so that they can start over and start from a more calm place, which will limit how escalated the conversation becomes and it increases the capacity to listen to each other. I think when people are looking for communication tools, a lot of the time it's just listening tools.
Yes, exactly. How to be an active listener, how to engage, how to ask questions specifically. If we have questions for clarification, right? I want to understand where you're coming from, where I'm not jumping in and telling you my point and my perspective. So yeah, absolutely. That's really great. And, anytime you work on these communication things, it can be, some couples are less willing to sometimes give in to their negative communication style. So I'm a stonewaller and you're saying she's anxious. I have to tell her that I'm going on a break. Yes, you do. Let her know that. And, anytime you feel like, oh gosh, I'm giving in some way or compromising in some way in my relationship, it's about valuing your partner, but overall you do these things because you value the relationship. And that's the point we want to get to, where both partners really value the relationship and make choices like these for the betterment of their relationship.
Exactly. So that they have this shared goal, right, to improve the relationship. And so they'll be open to respect each other's limits and acknowledge the needs from moment to moment, especially with communication, right? Give each other the opportunity to come back and be more available, right, to listen to those concerns.
Yep. It's an opportunity for both partners to take their piece of responsibility in the conflict, which is always everyone's favorite part. I didn't have a responsibility there. Well, you did, right? If you showed up to the conflict with some sort of negative words or actions, right, you had some sort of responsibility there. And again, it's not saying you're right, I'm wrong. It's we always have responsibility for what we bring into any situation, but particularly conflict. So, well, Brian, I have to say, it's great that you and I have worked through our stonewalling relationship. I've really seen that improve how we work together. No, of course, we're joking, but that it just shows that these things can show up in the workplace. These things can show up in family, and friendships. So it's really good to practice whether you're in a relationship or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that in past relationships, I've had partners that are pursuers where they just want to talk about an issue right there and then I can't put my thoughts together. And so ultimately I start saying things I don't need because I'm just being interrogated and asked for an answer. I'm feeling so overwhelmed. And obviously, right, that there was nothing constructive that came from that. And perhaps not even honest. So it's really important to give folks time, especially if they have different processing speeds.
Yeah, because if I'm pursuing you, that can feel, on a biological level, there's some sort of threat here, right? So I have to like throw an arrow at you, right, to defend myself. So that might be a criticism or a put down or some sort of action where we're slamming doors or that sort of thing. Again, really able to, soothe yourself and get out of these things is very, very important. So, well, anything else you want to share with our listeners today, Brenda, about stonewalling?
No, well, we hope that this talk today was helpful and provided some information on what it can look like. Of course, again, it differs from person to person, depending on what that fight or flight response might look like. But that there are ways to navigate it, right? There are ways to improve this communication styles to help you come closer to your partner, significant other, family member, colleague, whatever it is. So it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the last thing I would want to say about this is, folks can fluctuate between negative communication styles and conflict. So maybe you're not always a stonewaller, but pay attention to when you are and what's coming up for you that is triggering that response compared to if I'm being defensive or critical, the other ways that conflict can break down. What's coming up for me that's causing this, right? Because then we can try to start focusing on, specifically soothing the trigger and hopefully maybe even avoiding the conflict overall. So tall order, but it is possible. So Brenda, it was so nice to host with you again. Hopefully we will get to do this again soon. So thank you to everyone who listened today. We're very appreciative of our listeners. As a reminder, you can tune in every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. on KKNW and anywhere you stream podcasts.
Thank you, Michelle. It was great talking with you today.
All righty. Take care, Brenda.
Thanks for tuning in to Holding Ground. You can hear us here every Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m. on KKNW. I'm Laura Richer at Anchorlight Therapy Collective.
Find us online at anchorlighttherapy.com.
And we'll see you next week.